Still Tide. Like I said, they are a local band. All right. So we are going to talk a little bit more about Anna's personal journey as a musician, as a guitarist, and she's also a guitar tech, a traveling guitar tech, which is super rad. And like you were saying, we are kind of nerd out about gear and about guitar. So if you don't know a whole lot about guitars, kind of like I know a little bit, but not as much as Anna. So don't be embarrassed. And we have time for questions, and hopefully we'll be able to get through a bunch of stuff as well. So let's start things off. Tell me about when you first got interested in playing guitar.
I tried to learn how to play things. And so you're trying to learn how to play, and it was kind of in the era of tabs, guitar tabs. I don't know if you know what these are. I'm gonna get this book that I brought as a prop. But you could go online and you could just find music for all these songs, and they were just like classic rock songs. And I think like looking at all these songs online, and it was suddenly, without needing to learn music, and I knew I had some music theory from piano lessons early on, but like suddenly you could just play anything relatively. And I think like it kind of shifted my understanding of like how songs worked, because you kind of realize that a lot of the songs you love are like the same 4 chords. And so you'd be like, oh, I get, okay. So I think like after like playing them, not well, mind you, but like playing all these songs that I knew based on these tabs from the internet, it was kind of like that plateaued feeling of like, where I was like, oh, well, I get it, but like it doesn't sound like them and it doesn't sound as good, but like I'm kind of bored all of a sudden. So
what
then,
else is there?
Yeah, what else is there? And so then someone turned me on to Jimi Hendrix, and I was gifted this book as like a young thing, and it was probably like just changed my life. And I'm going to pass it around because it shows it has music and tabs in here. And tabs are like a numbered system for playing guitar, but I wanted to pass this around to show everyone what tabs look like. And it's kind of, I think it was kind of another door to step through as far as like understanding guitar and kind of like getting on my musical feet. But this like just like blew my mind, and I couldn't believe that someone was playing guitar like this, and it's so different and interesting, and
also from the Pacific Northwest.
And also, yeah, everything just tied itself together. But yeah, and this is actually that, and I've like kept it. I got this when I was like, 14? And it's like, so nobody take it. It's very precious. But I'll pass it around because I think it's so cool. But I think that was like the first time I'd had like a guitar hero, and then was kind of like starting to see into a whole different world of guitar. And then moving into high school, I'd like started writing music kind of around 8th grade. Had to put those like teen emotions somewhere, and so that's where they went. And then I started listening to Ani DeFranco, which is an amazing songwriter, but she's also this like beast of a guitar player, and so different. And at that time too, I'd never heard any guitar playing like that, and it was so aggressive and percussive, and like she was this whole orchestra within her playing. And I think that was kind of the first time too, seeing just different styles of playing. And she also uses some alternate tunings, and I think that also kind of like cracked my brain into that. That was a very unusually graphic image to say that. But I think that was another thing. And also seeing like a woman guitarist that I could look up to, because outside of that, like, especially growing up under like this wave of grunge music in the Pacific Northwest, it's all mostly dudes, except for like Slater Kinney and Bikini Kill, and like all that was coming out. But at the time, I didn't know, and all I could see was just like dudes and rock bands, and didn't know where I belonged. So I think that was kind of like seeing a guitar player that wasn't like a typical songwriter, like chorded, like these are my songs. It was like intricate and aggressive, and like kind of hit me in the same way that this did, where it wasn't just chords, it was like riffs and licks and kind of broken up. And it's fun to think about now, like the first time we ever hear things and how that impacts us and kind of sets in motion a whole different understanding of music or whatever it is that it does. But yeah, so those are like 2 pinnacles of my guitar learning, I guess, journey.
So you hear those things, and then how did you, well, with Hendrix, of course, with the book,
yeah.
But as you get into Ani DeFranco and hearing these different tunings and maybe using some different equipment with the guitar, how did you learn how to then apply that to your own music?
It's It's a good question. I never had lessons either, which I was really kind of like, I think that kind of, I see that now kind of as a benefit because I could kind of get into music in this kind of backdoor way where it wasn't suddenly like someone was like, and here you learn this song and these are these chords. We like had a chord book at home, but that was quickly abandoned to the successive tabs because it was just like, oh, and so I think kind of like trying to implement it, it took a really long time, but I think my style of playing, because I was just kind of like listening to stuff and kind of like emulating things without really knowing what they were, like with no sense of like, not real theory or like, there's, like the way that scales and work on the guitar, I kind of was seeing things more in like shapes and patterns than like what now I can identify as like a blues scale or like, it all had names, I just didn't know the names, I guess, at the time.
You do this with your hand.
Yeah, it'd be like this thing, and then like, and it's funny, all the songs I was writing like from my youngest years are just numbers. They're like lines of numbers, and those would be like chord shapes, and then like, it's all like in tabbed language, which I think is funny. I find these like little, like weird little math problems it looks like now. But, so I think that kind of all influenced that, but I didn't really know how, I guess is the point. So kind of like, in the absence of having a teacher or even like a mentor or another guitar playing buddy, because I didn't really have that, except for my dad, but teen years, so
yeah,
divide. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Love you, Dad. I kind of just failed, or like, would like try and fail and make a lot of noise with this like, I think what we bought that Strat was like, came with this really crappy practice amp. It was like a PV little amp. And I think later when I'd like saved up enough money, I bought a Digitech multi-effects board, which I was like so thrilled about. Because you could like, had distortion on it and reverb and chorus, and it just made you sound like monstrous. But if you can't really play, it was just kind of like clunky and loud, but in a like now more annoying way for the neighbors. But so yeah, a lot of experimentation trying to figure that out.
And at the same time, as you're figuring all of these things out, were you kind of experimenting with the capo and then with pedals, or did that come a little bit later?
That came later. It's funny, I like was kind of like staunchly all about the electric guitar like through high school, like adamantly, like when people asked me if I played guitar, I was like, I play electric guitar? Like I was so resistant to this idea of being like pigeonholed as this like singer-songwriter when I really just wanted to like really like get into the guitar and like shred. I like was so excited about that. So played guitar, that electric guitar, and then when I got to college, again another like twist was like, oh, the acoustic guitar is pretty cool, I guess. Probably influenced by those Ani days. And then I started playing acoustic guitar, so ditched the electric for a while. And I think kind of got more into songwriting. And as a birthday gift, my dear friends gave me this capo. It's called a shortcut, and it only capos 3 strings. So you can start using a lot of open tuning. So this wasn't something I necessarily like sought out at first, and then it was like kind of like a silly gift, like here's a capo, and then it changed everything because I think suddenly realizing that you could capo things differently, I started like carving out holes on other capos and changing the positioning, and then kind of trying to like, I think it just kind of opened up a whole nother world, especially in writing. And I think I was so excited about trying to make things that were different sounding, and kind of kept chasing this idea of like trying to find something that I hadn't heard yet. And I think this was a good avenue towards that, because I didn't see anyone else doing that at the time. And so that's how that kind of got started. And the alternate tunings kind of had started in high school, and mostly because my little hands, you couldn't reach all the time to get where you needed to be, so you like detune things. And I think that's another thing I love about guitars is that you can change the strings, the gauges, and there's a whole bunch of different things you can do. Like these are actually baritone strings that are on that guitar to hold this lower tuning, because they're meant for lower tunings. There's a style of guitar string called Nashville style that I really like, where it's like a high-strung guitar. Same notes, but strung like an octave up. But anyway, so kind of out of necessity, came to the alternate tunings, and then to the capoing, and that just, again, like opened another world. And then here I am like 5 capos later, just continuing. And there's another one I have that like I carved a hole in a regular capo, which is like this guy, your classic capo. And then I really wanted to be able to play these like low bass notes. And so I, carved a little hole. And then later someone was like, oh, they make a capo like that. And I was like, oh, cool. So then I bought that capo, and there's this little hole so you can get so the bass string will resonate, and you can like play bass notes below the capo. So that's my like little capo family.
Well, and before we go further, I guess, so we've got the capo family. Let's talk a little bit about the guitar family here. Also, you play 2 different guitars tonight. Both the same brand, but why did you choose these ones in particular for your music?
Actually, that's a great question, and I play these specifically because you can get really far up on the neck, which especially if you're capoing things a lot or like experimenting with like weird positions. Like I think some of the songs I was playing like early on, I'd be like capoed up here at like the 5th fret, and then I would have this shortcut like way up here, and then like we'll be trying to like tinker around, but not many guitars will let you get that far up. Like the Strats, and there's a lot of guitars that have cutaways, but even with the cutaways, sometimes you can't really get all the way up there. And so that's why I chose this specific guitar, and I got this one first, which I just love. I think it also looks really cool. And for that specific reason, and then found this one later for the same reason. And I play a Gretsch baritone guitar, which is also another, I like that guitar a lot. And then have some other kind of like more classic, it's like guitar nerds will know, but like a 335 copy, which is like a kind of like a semi-hollow body guitar. That was like another first attempt. Like bought it in Craigslist from some dude in Connecticut when I lived in New York. I was like, please don't kill me. Thank you.
Go back. Yeah. So as you're progressing, we can flash forward to a couple years ago. You're here in Denver now, and you have the band, the Still Tide. Tell me a little bit more about the band and who you are today, and what music is inspiring you today, and guitar players.
Oh man, so many. I feel like all the time, anyone with like a cool, interesting tone, I feel like immediately kind of like magnetized to that. But I think lately I've been went back and listened to a bunch of Radiohead records. And so that was really fun. And then also Elliott Smith. These are like revisits, but I think we, over the like pandemic winter, this last winter when COVID again like ran through our community and we were hunkered down, I watched a bunch of rockumentaries or music documentaries. And then I just was like, God, what do those records sound like now to my adult ears? And so I went back and listened to Radiohead and Elliott Smith and God, who else did I listen to? It was like a deep rabbit hole at times. It was pretty great. I went back and listened to Oasis, those records. So weirdly, that's kind of been in my brain of like going back to tones that I loved or things that excited me in the first place. But then lately, been really into Flock of Dimes. Jen is an amazing guitar player, amazing musician, but I really like her style of production on that last record and her guitar world, and she's great. And Hand Habits, also another amazing guitarist. And then I tend to just listen to all of my local friends here in Denver.
So many great local musicians.
So many. I think that's been what I've been listening to lately, is mostly local.
And for the past few years, you've also been a guitar tech, like a professional guitar tech. So tell me a little bit more about getting into that and when you're teching your own stuff, you're putting your own stuff together. But when was the first time that somebody asked you, like, do something with this and make it work for me?
Well, the first time I started I was in New York, and I went from the West Coast to New York, and that was the first time I played in a band, and like really had wanted to play in a band for a long time, and in high school and college, and it just never kind of like happened. And then I got to New York and started playing in bands, in a punk folk DIY band. It was pretty sweet. I was playing bass, my hair was a little blue. It's a whole era. But during that time I was playing guitar. Someone had asked me to play guitar in a band or whatever, and I was so excited because it was the first time that someone was like, hey, you should play guitar in my band. We've got all these like showcases coming up for this thing. And I was like, great, cool. And we did all these rehearsals, and it was like the first time I felt like I was in like a real band, like as a hired gun kind of thing. And I was like, oh my God, this is great. So I had that same Strat when I was 12. And we were practicing, and everything was going great. And then we went to go play this showcase. It was CMJ or something. And I'm sure there was like label reps there, and like it was a big deal. We were all very nervous. And we were playing, and I was like playing my guitar, and I was like, that's weird. It feels out of tune. I just tuned it. And I was like, and then I would like, song would end, and I like tuned it again. I was like, it's in tune. Like I don't get it. And I was like playing, and then it was like, something is so not right. And so like every song I was tuning, and I was just kind of like looking at my bandmates. And who knows? Now I'm like, who knows who heard that? But at the time I was like, oh my God, like I'm totally screwing this up. We're not gonna get the record deal. And so then I was like, there's something wrong with it. And so I was telling someone afterwards, and they're like, oh, you gotta go see Richie. Richie's your guy. And I was like, okay, cool, I'll go see Richie. Somebody gives me, I think, just his phone number. It's a good story, I promise. But I know, so it's like a weird setup. But called Richie, and he's like a guitar repair guy on the Lower East Side, and he works out of his apartment, and you call and you have to make an appointment, and then you like go and bring your guitar and be like, I'm having these problems, and then he'll work with you. But so I called him. I was the last appointment of the day, and I went in, and his apartment was probably like the size of this space, like, and it was just packed with guitars, like all up the walls, parts, everything you can imagine in a guitar world was just like packed. Like there was just one little aisle to get to him, and he was like in the chair with his desk, and Anyway, so I was like, oh, sir, I don't know what's wrong, and like immediately he was like, oh, your intonation isn't set right, and could immediately, just by looking at it, was like, oh, that's exactly the problem. And I just must have caught him on the right day, at the right time, with no one else after me, but he just kind of was like, oh, so this is, so what's happening right now is your intonation is out. So anytime you play a chord, like you play the same chord up here, but because of these, it's not going to be in tune because of this thing. And I was like, I've never heard of that before, and I felt kind of stupid. And so then I started asking a lot of questions, and he was just nice and kind of was just like, oh, this is what this is, and this is why this is, and this is why this isn't working, and this is also why this isn't working, and we can fix this. And so I left just kind of like being like, oh my God, I can't believe I didn't know that also. Like having come this far as a guitar player, and then just like not having a clue about how to like work on my guitar or know what was wrong. And so I asked him if I could become an apprentice, and by like some miracle, he's like in a hilarious way kind of known as this like kind of cranky older man, like, get out of here with your guitar, like, I don't, like, in a funny way, like, it's funny now, but at the time, I think I was really intimidated by him and by that experience and just kind of being fresh in New York, and asked him to be an apprentice, and then started working at his shop, and he just taught me everything. And what was really cool about him, and I think another reason I wanted to know all that stuff was, if you go to, and this was in New York standards, so this was like 2007, 2008 in New York. If you had an issue with your guitar, you would go to Guitar Center or some shop, and it would be like, okay, we'll get back to you in a month, and it'll be $150 or whatever. And with him, it was just only working musicians that were coming to him. Some people that didn't necessarily have like the fanciest stuff. Well, we did work on some fancy guitars, but people really just needed their instruments back immediately so they could continue making money. They were like, that was their bread and butter. And it was like, I think at the time, like a setup, which now at Guitar Center, I imagine is like $150, was like 30 at the shop. And he would get it to you in like 2 days. And it was just, and I just wanted so badly to be on the side of good and like help these other musicians, because it was like, and at that time I was like so broke, like I didn't know what to do. And if I was like, that's my dream and it's not working, what do I do? You can't be away from your one single guitar for a month. So I started working there, and at the same time was interning at a record label and a management team. Kind of weirdly, these worlds coincided, and in that one of the artists I was doing day-to-day management for, was releasing a new record, and we became friends, and I'd like worked on some shows and stuff, and she knew I was a guitar player and had been apprenticing at this guitar shop. And so it's a much longer story, but essentially she was like, we're going on the road for 3 months, do you want to come and do merch and guitar tech? And I was like, that's all I want to do, a dream, oh my God. So only like the little DIY, like punk folk really road experience I'd had, we hit the road for 3 months and went to Europe and did a whole tour and did like a 2-month national tour. And that was the last time I'd ever had like a day job. And then from then, we worked together for many years. And she's also, that was like a huge learning moment, because she's this like stunning like prodigy of a guitar player. Her name is Kaki King. You should definitely look her up if you don't know her already. Phenomenal. But she also was like all alternate tunings, like percussive tapping, like weird, and these really interesting guitars and tones. And like at the time she was doing this rock trio, so we were like in rock clubs every night, and then just this like insane guitar playing. So it was like a guitar nerd heavy time that kind of like set the foundation for the rest of it. But that's how that began, because I just had a broken guitar, and Richie and I are still in touch, and he always calls me on my birthday and leaves like the sweetest voice messages, and every time I'm in New York I make a point to go and see him. But he really just set the whole thing in motion, and I worked there for another few years until like I got busy on tours. But I just loved his whole like, it was really illuminating too, because people would just come in and you would just see not only all these just bizarre guitars and like see what people were trying to do, but just the way he talked about like, well, what do you want? What kind of tone do you want? What are you looking for? And like things that I think at Guitar Center, not to just rag on Guitar Center's fine, sorry. But like these kind of like mass repair places where you would just give your guitar to someone and then they would do whatever. But it was like tone crafting also. Like he had a range of pickups that you could choose from, and I think all these things that you like vaguely know about. And I think too, I also was so excited to get all that knowledge and be a woman in that world, because there were none at that time. Like, I still know only like a few guitar techs who are women.
And that are touring and like
that are
going
touring,
all
yeah.
of that. I have to ask this question. In like a previous life, I was like a chainsaw technician, and so I'm like, this is a thing. Like there was this one thing that I always liked to do, and that was like replacing the piston. So I have to wonder, as a guitar tech, is there something where you're like, I really love doing this because it's a lot of fun? Is there something?
Oh,
that
I
you like
love
to
that
fix?
question. I actually really love changing strings. I know that's funny, but like I think especially on the road, it was like such a meditative thing to do, and it's like one of the only times when you're, at least on these tours in the last like 7 years, the only time where you're really alone, kind of, would be like prepping all these guitars for the show. And I think that was like really healthy, like for my own mental health on tour, just to kind of like have some solace. But it became kind of this Zen thing, and I wonder if that was like spurred on by something Richie had said, but I think, yeah, there was like, of course, and I'm so superstitious about stuff. I've like weirdly developed some superstitions about guitarists, especially like certain things have to go a certain way before the show starts, and then I know that we'll have a good show. And then if, like same with like changing strings, like there was like this weird kind of like meditative flow that I felt like signified like, we're gonna have a good show, it's gonna be good, everything's gonna work. So, but yeah, that would be, I love that you were a chainsaw tech also.
It's the thing I did, it is so as you're also learning how to do this, and you're with your friend on tour who've got all of these different tunings and all that, how is that then affecting your guitar playing afterwards and during the tour?
Oh, massively. Like I think, I also love too that my first touring experience was with a front woman. I think that also just changed how I saw, because I think when you go on tour in that way, in any capacity where you kind of like, oh, the veil's been pulled back and you see how it all works, and being a tech, you have to like navigate all the other crew and personnel in a venue, and you kind of have to like, it took me a long time actually to just kind of be like, to kind of hold my own in those spaces, because I was just like this small girl and these like huge dudes like running around stage, and I'd have to be like, could I have a table? I just need one table. Excuse me, sir? And then you just, anyway, long learning curve. But I think watching her kind of be at the front of all of these situations, or like open my eyes to see that you have to see it almost first to know that you can do it or that it's possible. So I think in that way it was really informative, but also just her playing. I think what was really cool about those shows was she had this rock trio and just like slayed. Like it was an amazing show, really interesting tunings and interesting songs. They weren't like just interesting parts, and there was such a focus on her playing, which I thought was really cool. But then in the middle of the show, there was a breakdown where she would do kind of the songs that she became famous for, which are like Pink Noise and these very like tappy, kind of like heavily guitar nerded songs. And then again, it was such a stark contrast, but they were all equally engaging. And I think that too was like, oh, you can do this rock thing and like make this room shake, and then you can bring everyone in on this like hyper focus to your little guitar in this massive house, and everyone's just as riveted. And then also like learning a bunch of new tunings, and that was great. And because in order to check tunings before they go out, you need to like be comfortable, you hear it. Like I always check obsessively every tuning that goes out, like multiple times. It's probably a problem for my mental health. But then you would check it with like, I would like use a different shape to check certain songs and would know like immediately if it was in the right tuning, if it was the right song. Because it was like every song's in a different tuning. You'd like kind of like just like running back and forth the whole show. And so in that way I had to get really familiar, and then would like start writing in those tunings. And I think that's one of the things I also love about alternate tunings is as a writing tool, because I think as guitar players you can get so stuck in the way that your hands will just kind of like naturally move through scales or chords that when you're working in an alternate tuning you can't. You're like kind of broken from just like doing what you would like do without thinking. And so as a writing tool I think it can like push you into like a different space than you would be for songwriting.
Let's say it's summer 2019 when people were freely able to tour, and you were hired to go out on tour with somebody. What gear would you bring with you to ensure that you were doing the best job possible, or do you just kind of rely on what's on the tour?
Well, it depends on the tour. During that era, I had been working for Tallest Man on Earth, who's another amazing guitar player, like total shredder, incredible finger picking style, also a bunch of different tunings and capo positions. Like, it was kind of this weird, like, oh my God, we're like made to work for each other, with each other. But with him, they had like this whole, because it's such a guitar heavy show, we had like a guitar, what's called like the guitar tech box, and it was this tall box, like, I'm so small, funnily enough, but it's like, you know, like came up to here, and I could probably fit like 4 of me inside. But it had like all of the necessary strings that we would need, and all kinds of picks, and like hundreds of capos it seemed, and all those tools. So for that tour, I would bring just my own little Pelican, which always has like a strobe tuner in it, a classic Boss tuner, just like a classic chromatic tuner, and then like all of these tools, I'm sure as like a chainsaw tech, which I just will forever love, that like just weird, quirky tools that you've either made or like just got somewhere along the road that it's like your
The
special
screwdriver.
wrench. Yes, yeah, exactly. So I have like 2 little things of like those precious tools, and tools that are very specific to guitar stuff. Like I have one tool that I really love that will help tighten these washers, and like will help tighten the washers on jacks, things that you can't get to with normal tools. But yeah, screwdrivers, and a bunch of washers and springs for pickups, and nuts, and lubricant for nut slots, and saddles, and spare bridges, spare tuning machines, spare pots, spare input jacks, soldering iron, towel, clamps, lots of glue, lots of super glue, mostly for nails, actually. He does the acrylic thing. It's funny. Yeah, I need to find a new solution. These are pretty bad. Yeah, but just like all the random things and things that I like, you like start carrying them because like that one time, that one weird thing happened. So now I have like, I'm trying to think about what weird thing I have in my tech box so I could be like, oh yeah, but it's like probably a weird piece of wood that does one thing really well. And I have like a 1/4 inch that doesn't have the barrel on it, so you can like snake it into places. Flashlight, mirrors, yeah.
Well, then let's talk about like your shows specifically, and I have to imagine that you kind of have all that stuff on deck anyways, but then you're getting ready, you have your guitars, and you have your pedal board. What specifically do you like to do when you're performing your songs and you're getting your gear ready? What does like a typical night look like before a steel tide show?
Oh, just lots of panic, mostly.
Necessary.
Just kidding. My girlfriend's like, no, it's true, it's true. I try, a local show, I try to practice and warm my voice up during the day and kind of like feel really confident about what we're going to perform. And especially just getting my voice in action is like always kind of takes a little bit of like, here we go. And then shower prep, get ready to appear in public, remember how to talk to people and, you know, work in the world. And then like getting ready to perform on stage, I usually go through my pedals, and what it looks way cooler than it is. I mean, it's pretty cool, let's be honest. But it's actually pretty basic, and I'll give you a quick, let's use this guitar. This is the one in that CB tuning. Which I really just love. So I have, this is basic, but I have 2 reverbs and 2 delays, 1 freeze pedal, and a compressor booster pedal. And this thing in the middle is more for vocals and a different thing. But dry guitar sounds like this. So that's with nothing, right? A little reverb. A whole different level of reverb that I can adjust with this pedal, which is I'm most excited about. And then delay, this is 1 delay. And then a second delay that would be song specific because it's kind of aggressive. And then a freeze pedal, which allows you to kind of like grab one of the notes you're playing and just hold on to it, which is super fun. And that's it. And then the compressor pedal just kind of helps, especially changing from guitar to guitar, kind of evens out those tones and makes it easier on our lovely sound folk. And a booster when you're like really shredding into a solo and you need to like kind of leap above where you've been. Yeah. But, you know, pedals I think are kind of a slippery slope. Because like I just keep thinking about that Digitech board that I had that was like all the settings have names, and there's like the Van Halen setting, and like, just like me, this tiny little thing being like, and like just like couldn't, you know, make it sound great. But it's easy to kind of like get seduced into this world of like reverbs and delays and stuff, and I think it sounds magical, but sometimes I feel like there's always this kind of joke too with guitar players, like you know when someone gets a delay pedal for the first time, because every song is Yeah, like every song is like has heavy delay or is like clearly delay informed. And I did the same, like all those songs. Like I'm sure, like I think now I kind of, probably having, largely having worked with other bands and watching them use pedals or kind of the way that they shape tone, especially for a live performance and making it interesting, or just kind of like using those pedals in a way where you don't just turn it on and have it on the whole song. It's like comes in for the specific part and there's a reason, and it's like time set to this thing, and pedal boards can get so complex, and it's like a whole other world that I'm trying to kind of like, I'm curious about, but I also don't want to like fall too far down the hole and then kind of forget the quality of songwriting. I feel like that could be I'm sure I've fallen down that where I'm like, this song doesn't mean anything, but listen to this delay. Like, so I try, yeah, which I like loved, and it's so important to have that joy. And I think in that way, kind of refreshing your pedal deck occasionally to kind of like, in the same way that those tunings I was talking about and like the high string tuning and different things, just to kind of pull you out of where you've been with a guitar and kind of make you excited again and see what songs are in there. I always feel like instruments or pedals have songs for you. If you just dig enough, they'll come out. So in that way, that's been true with the pedals. And I like that they're not too complicated, but sometimes I'm like, man, I would really love a Chase Bliss like mood pedal, or this like dark underworld pedal, or this rainbow machine pedal. All of them, I want all of those.
That kind of like leads me into my next question. Like you have a certain sound, obviously, as a musician, and pedals can help you achieve that. Is there a pedal out there that is not the sound, but you still kind of want to like play around with it and see what it would be like? I guess, outside of what you do.
Kind of all of them. I'm trying to think about. There's this one called, I think the brand is Microcosm, or maybe that's the name of the pedal. That one of the bands I worked with, the violin player has it, and it's just like makes the weirdest sounds. They make another pedal called Infinite Jets. I'm like losing the name of this pedal, but it's Microcosm or something like that. That's the one I think I'd be like, whoa, what is that? And then the Rainbow Machine, and these pedals called Chase Bliss pedals. They're like, that's a company. There's been a huge chip shortage because of the nature of our lives right now, and so all of these pedals that I think normally wouldn't be so as hard to find are like so sought after right now. They're like, and like, you follow all these people on Instagram and they're like, next 10 pedals are coming out in a month, and then like probably another year until we get those chips. So in that way, I think I've like coveted certain pedals that aren't available, all the Chase Bliss ones, which are just like, some of these pedals are very like basic, like, and I've chosen them specifically for that reason, especially for live shows. There's like these other pedals that are so advanced that you just get kind of like overwhelmed with how many parameters you can change on things. And for a live show, if something gets screwed up, you're just like, I don't know how to get you back to what I like. And then you're just like, okay, cool, I guess we'll just do this sound. And so in that way, like some of those pedals are better for studio where you can like really sit and tinker with them. There's all these like dip switches and MIDI connections, and you can like time code everything. It's a whole world.
There's a whole world you can get into. So as we get closer to the end, I would like to ask you if somebody is interested in playing guitar for the first time, or even digging a little bit deeper into getting into guitar tech, what are some words of advice that you would give to somebody who's kind of just, maybe held a guitar, but what would next steps be in your opinion?
I think, and maybe that's kind of touches on where I started. I think lessons are really great, and if you have someone that can kind of lead you down a road or mentor you, or kind of like, I think getting over that first, especially with guitar can be so painful when you first start, especially like acoustic strings. It just hurts, and it takes a while to get over that. So you have to be motivated to make it over that. So whatever it takes to get you over that pain. But I don't think lessons are necessary, I guess would be my point. And I think kind of following whatever interests you is on the playing side, and kind of like dismantling it. I think trying to keep yourself engaged, especially when it's painful, is the key. I think I like taught guitar at an arts camp, and it was like just trying to get them to just even get that first chord, and it was like the best feeling in the world, but it took so long just to physically get your hands to behave that way. So to keep them engaged, you'd have to like make it really fun until they like got over the thing. But as far as guitar tech stuff, there's a lot of amazing resources now online that are great, and a lot of YouTube videos, but buyer beware. I mean, some of those videos are super informative and very well thought out and real. Then there's a lot of people that have really interesting ideas about how to do things on a guitar that I don't necessarily agree with. But so you kind of need to vet them a little bit. But I think I wish more people, I wish I would have had, because I think even the musicians I was playing with at the time, like there wasn't really a strong set of or not a strong understanding of like how to fix a guitar or how to like know what was wrong with it. And it's a lot of it is really simple. And I wish, I want to find a way to kind of extend that knowledge outward, because I think it's all very daunting. And then I wish more people had those skills. So I'm trying to think about a good way to point people down that road. I should just start like a little guitar tech school. Just even like some basic things I think to just kind of like make you less scared. I think for a long time I was really scared of like doing anything to the guitar, because I was like, oh my God, if I do anything,
then you got to take it in.
Yeah, and then I got to pay $150, and I want to have it for 2 months. But I remembered in high school, kind of ill-advisedly being like, well, let's see what's in here. And I like took it apart. And I like took the pick guard off and like was very curious and like looked at all the things, but then like, gratefully put it back okay. But I'm sure that intonation problem was probably because I screwed it up, like tinkering with it, being like, I wonder what this does. And just at the time, I don't think there was a lot of stuff online, or didn't really know who to talk to about that. And I think too, like, I didn't really know not only who to talk to, but also felt kind of like that world wasn't very approachable either. And I think because I kind of felt shy about my like skill set, having not had lessons, and kind of coming at this from which now I see as an asset, but at the time I like didn't really know, like I just felt kind of bad. And so I think I like was shy to ask questions, and it took a long time to get there. So I wish that, I guess I'm saying it, but there's a lot of wishing that I wish there was more of a road to point people down. And there probably is, I just kind of.
You've gone down the road in your own way, which is great.
Yeah.
And I think another thing is like, the more you know your tool, the better you're going to be able to use it also.
Right. Absolutely. And like being able to swap out pickups and realize what's happening in the guitar and why. I think too, when you play a really nice guitar with really great pickups, or like, once you know, it's like eating really beautiful chocolate or something. Like once you know what that tastes like, and then you go back to your crappy chocolate, you're like, man, like what, now I know, and I can't, this is no longer satisfying. And I think working with all those artists, I felt the same, where they just have this incredible tone that it's like, how do I get even close to that? Because now this sounds terrible. So, yeah, knowing how to work it, I think, is a huge skill. Yeah, I forgot where we were going.
That's exactly where we were
nostalgia.
And as we get close, if you have questions, we're about ready to answer those. But do you have any upcoming shows, either with the Still Tide or maybe with some other projects that you're involved in?
Yeah, both actually. I play guitar for a band called Blue Book, and we have a show. We're releasing a record on Saturday at the High Dive, our home base, and super excited. That's been fun to be a guitarist in a band. Haven't done that in a while. And then Still Tide, we're opening for a band called the Cactus Blossoms next week at the Fox in Boulder, Aggie in Fort Collins, Lulu's in Colorado Springs, and Globe Hall here in Denver. Yeah, and then we're kind of working on our own record and spending a lot of time tweaking weird pedals in the studio and being like, oh, listen to this, which is fun. I feel like you kind of, I don't know, I feel like sometimes in like the evolution of like a music career, you can get really serious and be like, this is our tone and this is what we're doing and these are our songs, and then you like kind of lose sight of the joy of it because you're trying so hard to like push in one direction or something. And it's kind of fun now to be like in that kind of joyful tinkering space where you're just able to play in sound and remember kind of those first moments of like when you heard something new for the first time when you were like in middle school and you're like, oh my God, that thing, chase that. So.
All right, well, does anybody have any questions for Anna? I've got a few from the chat because we are also streaming, but if anybody here has anything for us.
Okay, I'll go first.
Yeah.
Thank you. I really have enjoyed this. I love your sound.
Thanks.
My wife has been hitting me because I'm like, I need that.
That's how it begins.
You know, I really, I have to say a comment first. I really love you talking about guitar tech and that because that is something that I never really sort of thought about. And I was an amateur guitar player through high school and college. And, you know, we got to that place where we're sort of starting to learn music and being able to play together. But then we would go and play in someone's backyard or a school auditorium, and it would just sound awful. You know, it was just terrible. And that really, like, kind of sent us all away. You know, we just weren't serious enough. But I've always wondered about how do bands, you know, they all start off in garages and, you know, amateur and whatever, and then they start to develop that musical ability, but then they also have to have the stagecraft to be able to pull off a show, be able to have in-tune instruments and no feedback and work with effects and everything. And so they all have like some tech person wander into their life and kind of help them to craft their sound, or does somebody in the band take that on, or how does, how does that happen for bands to make that leap into sort of pro performance?
Yeah, that's a great question. That's a great point, actually. I'm just trying to just like going back through my bands. I was like, how did we figure that out? Because I think a lot of it came down to band members that knew somebody or knew how, or like, you know, like everyone kind of, I think especially in that era when I'm thinking about like many years ago, everyone's just kind of like pooling all of their energy and all their know-how and lots of failures and guesses and terrible sounding shows and like, especially in that punk folk band, which was a blast. I mean, in some ways, but you're like, you know, there's some great stories. You have to be like young, like it was like a mid-20s behavior, or like energy, rather, where you can like sleep on floors and drive all night and like eat like terrible food and not shower, you know, like just that kind of like, but you're like doing it for the art and you're so excited. But now I'm like, God, I can't imagine. But at those, like, kind of in that, thinking about those shows and how I was like, how did we ever figure out how to make that sound good? And honestly, now I'm like, I don't know if we did sound good. I think there's kind of a breaking point too, where like, trying to make things sound good with the little that you have, especially when you're starting out and you don't have access, like pedals are really expensive and guitars are expensive, amps are really expensive, and you know, for years we just played out of these like terrible things. I didn't have any pedals until I was like, I don't know, I'm like trying to think, outside of that amazing Digitech box that I had, but like didn't really start getting down that road for many years, probably part because of the expense, but I think maybe that's kind of where there's that shift of like everyone pulling their energy together and trying to figure it out, and then you either make it past that level or like, honestly now I'm trying to think about if playing live shows, like when we graduated that band kind of onto like a bigger stage, we were playing with some other buddies that were in a bigger band and we were opening for them, and that was kind of how that evolved and how that ever kind of hit the road. And they would tell us things. And then I'm thinking about this now, I'm like, oh right, it's all community and people kind of being like, oh, you know what, you should try this, or like, hey, I got this new pedal, you should check this out. And sharing information that way was crucial, but also those bands, as they got bigger, would go into studios with producers and people that really knew how to make sound for a record. And I think that's kind of a huge learning curve as a band when you go into a studio, because suddenly you're under the microscope and you can hear everything and how terrible these parts don't work, or like this tone doesn't fit at all with this thing. And I think that's kind of a huge like moment for a band to, and then usually there's a producer there, or sometimes not, we didn't have one for a while, that can kind of like help, you know, herd a band towards a sound or towards an idea and gently kind of push them into better tone. And I think, but I feel like I've been in projects too early on where like it just kind of shattered because you couldn't get past that. And it's not fun, and especially when you don't sound good. And I think about that a lot with tone. I was like recently playing, I like didn't have access to all my gear, and I was like playing through a crappy situation. And I was just like overplaying, like playing so much, and it was because the tone was terrible. And you recognize then that like if you have really good tone, you make really simple parts because the tone is beautiful, and you can just kind of like linger in it, and you don't need to. But if you have bad tone, I notice I just like fill it up because you're almost hiding the fact that it's bad. And so in that same way, I think probably with all those early shows, we were just like overplaying it because it just probably didn't sound very good. But I think I wish there was a tech. Now I'm like, I want to be that tech. I want to be that like, fairy god tech mom. Yeah, just come down and be like, you know what, you should try. But I think about Girls Rock Camp a lot actually with that, or just kind of like wishing I had something like that, or any kind of mentor that could have just kind of helped push me down certain roads, like having other people in that music community. I think that's how I learned about anything, was either through my bandmates and what they'd learned from older siblings or other bands, or from people that were just kind. Like I'll never forget, even like when I got to Denver, Nathaniel, we were playing a show, like this was like years ago, and he was like, oh man, have you ever tried a felt pick on a bass? And I was like, no, oh my God. And then like, that changed everything. But it was like as simple as being like, I'm really excited about this thing, you should try this thing. And how also that just kind of makes a community blossom, and suddenly you're sharing ideas and amps and spaces and gear and people, and yeah. So I don't know if that quite answered, but go on.
And you had a question as well?
Ooh, good question. I'm like kind of ashamed. Well, I have these two, and then I have a Gretsch baritone, which is tuned much lower than a normal guitar. I don't have the Strat. I sold it to someone. But I do have a new kind of Telecaster Strat I really like, a 335 copy. I'm babysitting another 335 copy, not technically mine. And then I have a Gretsch, it's like a Chet Atkins special that someone wasn't playing and was like, you'll make better use of this, and just gave to me. But I think it has a curse. See, again, I'm superstitious, but he's like, came from a dubious, something. Anyway, long story there. That's 7. I have 2 bass guitars, if that counts.
What about a 12 string? I would think
Oh.
love that with all the different tunings, like doubles your pleasure.
Yeah, actually, I'm borrowing Jake's 12-string. It's a Teardrop Ovation 12-string that is his, but it's at my house while he's in London. So I do have a 12-string.
Jake is your band.
I mean, Jake is my bandmate. Yeah, longtime
That's
bandmate.
wonderful.
He actually also had the same book, which I forgot to pass around. I'll pass around. And that's how we kind of bonded. Actually, when I was in New York, he was this like crazy guitar player, and I was like, I just want to like have a lesson. Like, can I just nerd out about guitars? And then instead of getting a lesson, we just ended up jamming together, and then became bandmates. And I played in his band and toured everywhere, and then he played in my band. And yeah, but we've like talked specifically about this book by Andy Aladort.
Hendrix.
Jimi Hendrix. It's great. Anyway. Oh, really? Oh my gosh, I gotta meet that guy. Oh my god. Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah. It's this book is great if you want to learn Jimi Hendrix. Anyway, I don't know how to like get it. I can't cross the barrier, I guess. Feedback.
From the stream, we have a question. Acrylic nails versus picks. What made you decide to go with acrylic nails as opposed to using a pick?
Well, I'm actually really terrible with a pick, honestly. I'm like, but I would always play with my fingers, and just like without any, like I didn't even think about this for a long time, probably until khaki, because khaki has like a full set of nails, and then suddenly you have a pick on every finger, and it's like, you can really just, your playing just gets to change so much in that way. But I would just play really hard and just bleed everywhere. So like all my first, especially acoustic guitars, were just like splattered with blood, kind of gross. and so I think that's how it all, like that playing style developed. And then when I saw Kaki do that acrylics, I was like, oh my God. And especially, and it like, that was kind of a huge learning curve too, because she would go to like a nail salon and just be like, okay, there's just this one hand. And they would do it, and she would get these like, the claw, like this crazy thing. They would, you know, make all this magic. And so now I just do two. But for a while I did like the full thing, and then I was like, nah, I just really need the two.
These are the playing fingers.
Yeah, so.
Also from the chat, how do you take care of your hearing and continue to develop an ear for tuning? How do you stay sharp?
Oof, I think about that a lot, actually. Especially lately, I just got a rehearsal space, and like lately all I've been doing is like sitting right in front of my amp and just like playing so loud, because in a rehearsal space you can make as much noise as you want instead of our little apartment. So in that way I'm like, what are you doing? But just like sitting straight in front of this amp. But my ears were ringing obviously after that, and I was like, get scared, because I think about a lot of my musician friends who have lost hearing and now need even more sound to be like through monitors, which are those things on the bottom you can see in this photo. Need even more through their monitors because they can't hear anymore. And I've actually lost a lot of hearing. And this year, I was playing bass in a band. And of course, as a bass player, you're usually next to the hi-hat. And you're right in all the venues we were playing, really close to each other. And that drummer was really, really excited and really loud. And so now in this year specifically, it's a lot less. I can't hear as much, which is really sad. So I wear earplugs, and then I'm trying to do like a DIY in-ear system, which kind of protects your ears a little bit. But I think about that a lot, where like I have to, when you're tuning backstage, like the stage sound is so massive that I usually have the guitar signal go through a tuner or like an EQ pedal that I can like carve out certain frequencies that are interfering with what I'm trying to tune. And then I go into 2 different tuning pedals usually, 3, sometimes C, again, a little OCD, a little overkill. But I can see that it's in tune relatively, but I always need to hear it. And if I can't hear it, like now I have an amplification system, but like that, if I can't hear it, even though it says it's in tune, as any guitar player would know, like sometimes it's close, like you're on the note, but it's like cents off, and it's not going to resonate and be magical. And so lots of like going through that. But I worry that, because especially in those situations, I'm like blasting my little ears with that one, like trying to get that one note in tune. So in that way, I think I need to find a new solution, because it's pretty bad. It's not. So, and going to concerts, always wear earplugs, regardless, almost.
I feel like our generation was like, you're lame if you wear earplugs. So,
Yeah.
like, and now I'm like, I've got like professional earplugs. Because
Oh my gosh.
Does anybody else in the audience have any questions? We have a couple more from the chat, but I wanted to open this up again. All right. What is one of your more versatile alternative tunings, and are you drawn to one more than the other?
Oof. I really do like the CD tuning. I think I really love just like low notes, and I think, especially when playing alone, like really try to get like a full, like kind of a wider range of sound. And so having those low notes, especially to kind of like play more bass lines or kind of carry the low end of the show, I like those lower tunings. I think for a while that was my go-to. And I think just in terms of writing, like some songs will start in those alternate tunings, and you'll just kind of like get a weird idea. And then sometimes my favorite thing is to be like, oh, I really like that. I wonder if I can do that on this tuning or like in a normal tuning. And then watch it kind of evolve, traveling through those tunings. So I'd say that's my go-to, or that was. And then lately, I've been really into E, A, C sharp, G sharp, B, E, which is like, I don't know. And that was another one where I was like, oh, I really like how this sounds with this tuning. And then I was like, but this note doesn't really fit, but I really like this chord. So I'll just like, what if I just change this a half step up? And I was like, oh, that's cool. And then like recape it, and I was like, oh, that's cool. Now we can make this bass note different. And like, that was one that just kind of like like out of necessity made itself, which I kind of love that was like guided me towards it. And that was one that, yeah, now there's like several songs actually that are in that tuning. And a variation of that, Acres, which is E, G sharp, C sharp, G sharp, B, D sharp, which is just like another 2 knocked down. Anyway, if that makes sense.
Several tunes. Another one from chat, I use cut up ping pong balls in music therapy to play guitar. Have you tried any other odd tools?
Oh, like as nails. Oh, genius idea. Is that what they mean, I wonder?
I would assume.
Oh, that's great.
Chat it in.
That just changed my life. That's what I should do instead of these, because they're clearly breaking. Any weird tools, other weird tools like that? I do, I mean, it's not specific to hand stuff, but I like, especially with bass, but like putting foam near the bridge and kind of like softening the sound. I like doing that a lot. I feel like there was actually a unique thing that I was just doing. I'll have to think about that. I was like, there have been weird things, but I think then like you try to play them out in the world, and then it's like, I think, yeah, there used to be days where we would like, that was actually kind of a whole learning curve. Speaking of shows where you're like trying to make the performance roll and be good, all those tunings were so cumbersome to tune to, which was part of why I think I ended up kind of getting more guitars, because in a live show, it's just like such a buzzkill when you're playing a show and everyone's like, great, yeah, and then you're like, okay, now I'm just gonna sit quietly and tune this guitar to this weird tuning and try to say something funny and not do very well, and then like look at someone, and then the whole energy dies, which is kind of, when we talk about guitar tech stuff in general, that's kind of most of my role in these bands, is that a song ends and you're there with the next guitarist, so the next song, just like the show just can move without any pause. And that's especially with Tallest Man, like every song is a new guitar, like every single song. So it's just like constant interchange, which makes for this powerful, seamless show. But it's like you couldn't do that without someone else like tuning backstage and panicking.
Getting it done in 3 minutes or less.
Yeah, exactly. But no, I'll have to think about it. But that was kind of another reason, and that kind of shifted my playing too, is like writing all these songs in weird tunings and then having to work them into a different tuning that was like one I would be using on more songs. So for a live show, you could just kind of roll onto another song instead of like stop and change and change and change, and that can be annoying. But I'll think about weird things, because I remember there were, but they kind of got phased out because it was just like, didn't work, or like
stick.
Yeah, like, yeah. Now I'm remembering some other instruments even when I was like, yeah, that was a terrible idea.
Last question, and this is about songwriting. Do you start with the lyrics first, or do you start with the music first?
It used to always be music, and I think in that way it was kind of frustrating, where I would have all these songs that I loved or ideas that I loved, and then just like didn't know what lyrical place to put them. And so I think a lot of songs got kind of stalled out in that practice of like having these cool riffs, and then if I was playing guitar, I would just like love playing guitar, and then instead of like sitting down to like craft these lyrics, would just play, and then those songs like just, you know, never got done. So in that way, music first, but then lately, I write every day, but I have like not like a journal, but kind of like a little collection, like a notebook, and like random ideas will be collected in there. And now I'm better at kind of like, when those ideas do come, exercising them then and kind of like unpacking them in a way that I used to be like, oh, I'll get to that one day. I'll like, that's a good idea. Okay, 2 years later, maybe I'll look at that again. And so now kind of in a better flow. So now kind of lyrics are coming and music is still ever coming. And I'm just trying to kind of keep up with it, I guess. Trying to keep that.
Where they sit with each other.
Yeah, and I started to write, because I used to just get so carried away playing and not working on the songs, because I just like loved playing guitar, that now I like, not force, but gently push myself to work on songs on the piano instead. And which is also kind of like writing songs on bass. You're so limited that you really, like you can kind of see the bones of a song when you're playing bass or rudimentary piano, because you can't do all the cool frills or like splash a bunch of reverb on it and make it sound cool. You're like, this is the song in its most basic form, and if it doesn't work here, it probably won't fly very far, even under like the waves of reverb that I would love to put it under. So.
All right. This has been our first guitar session here at the Denver Museum of Nature and Science at the guitar exhibit. If you haven't seen it in person, I highly suggest you do. This is a part of an overarching story. We're actually going to be speaking with 3 more local musicians. We've got Stevie Gunther on DIY. We've got Lady Gang on a one-woman act with a ton of pedals and making sounds on her own. And then we'll also have a performance from Felix Fast Forward in the planetarium, and I'll be speaking with him about multi-instrumentalism and how that speaks to playing guitar as well. But Anna, thank you so much for being our first guest.
Oh my gosh, thanks so much for having me. This is so cool. I love talking about this stuff too.
Thanks, so great.
Thanks so much for coming.
Thanks for being here.